I just had this sense that I didn't want to be on this side of the negotiating table. I wanted to be on the other side.
Yes.
I wanted to be doing the deals.
Yep.
I just had this compound of experiences that made me want to be the fabulous one and not the person drafting the contract.
The New Zealand Business Podcast, brought to you by Gorilla Technology, your strategic and proactive IT partner.
I'm your host, Paul Spain, futurist and chief executive at Gorilla Technology. I love to see people and their organisations thrive. The New Zealand Business Podcast is all about helping you learn from our most innovative and tenacious leaders. Today, we have the privilege of hearing from Claudia Batten, one of our most respected voices in the world of technology, entrepreneurship, and business leadership. Amongst other accomplishments for Claudia that she is known for is selling her firm Massive to Microsoft in a deal worth in excess of $200 million US. We'll delve into Claudia's story, which is full of insights and lessons on innovation, resilience, team alignment, and her squiggly life career philosophy. Claudia is currently board chair at Serco and also serves on the boards of Michael Hill International, Air New Zealand, and Vista Group. Claudia also mentors and advises some of New Zealand's brightest founders. The New Zealand Business Podcast is proudly brought to you by One New Zealand and Gorilla Technology. Before we jump into the interview, a quick question. How confident are you that your organisation is well positioned from the perspectives of technology and AI enablement and cybersecurity risk reduction? If you're not confident, get in touch with Gorilla Technology today to learn how a technology or cyber audit could help you. All right, let's jump in. Claudia Batten, a real privilege to have you here in the studio. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Well, love to get started by hearing a little bit about where you were born and where you grew up.
My childhood, the early years. I'm a Wellingtonian and I grew up in Karori, so I'm very used to being chilled to the bone as I commiserate with other folks from Karori on a semi-regular basis. So went to school there right through secondary school and actually went to university in Wellington as well. So I was at Vic University and I did law and commerce and I got honours in law. So I was a bit of a rat bag as a younger child, like
really?
All over the place. And then when I was about 15, I got scared that I wasn't going to have very good grades. So I kind of buckled down and from there got quite studious. So for pre-15, kind of chaotic, post-15, quite studious. And now I like to think I've got a nice merger of the two.
And so, what was your upbringing like? What sort of things took your interest? Can you see any connection between the things that took your attention, during those years growing up, and what you ultimately ended up doing?
Yeah, there's a couple of things when you look back. I always love the Steve Jobs quote that the dots make sense in the rear view mirror, basically.
Yes.
And there are a couple of things. So pretty normal childhood. Mum and dad were both in business, and so definitely surrounded with a lot of business conversation from a young age, and a lot of their friends were on various boards as well, all the men, of course, because that was that era. But I know that I was really fascinated by business. There was just something about that I felt really interesting, kind of the maker-builder side of things. And it really was a desire to go into building things that ultimately had me leave law and want to go off and do something different. So I definitely know that was a data point, and even to the point that I used to take my dad's Fortune magazine and Economist for reasons I don't really understand. But, at a young age, I was reading those. I don't know, maybe there just weren't that many magazines when we were younger and they were expensive. And I'm also a very curious person. So yeah. I think that definitely fueled my interest. The other thing I'd say, and I think this is a great one for parents, is my folks, back in the day bought a computer for us to have because a friend of theirs had said this technology is really important, and bless my parents for doing that. So I got really interested in technology, I think, through that lens. I was by no means a coder nerd, like that's not what I was, but I was early to have a laptop, early to have a mobile phone. Like I was just really interested in the new stuff. And so I think that really, cracked open a curiosity in the tech field for me as well.
Yeah, that's great. And do you know, were there particular things that sort of triggered that curiosity, or was it the fact that the technology was there? So then you got involved because you had access to it.
I think I like new things.
Yeah.
So I think, I still think new tech is cool. So there's just something in me. My grandfather was an engineer, and he was a little bit like that too. He had one of the early brick cell phones too. Like there's something in my genetic composition that likes, when I get a new laptop, I feel quite giddy and excited. Like there's something there that I think also from a young enough age, seeing the power that you could get from technology. I think that's the other piece for me. I'm quite a high kind of productivity, efficiency oriented person, and knowing that's what I love about AI right now, knowing the power I could get out of these technologies, I think. And then the newer computer was always faster and had more memory and all of the rest of it. So I think it was a little bit of in my genetic composition, but also playing with it, could see how that could kind of power me up.
And did you have conversations that were about that crossover between business and technology at
Not
at
at
home?
all.
No?
Not at all. No, that's a great question. No, I think the only piece there is because I was reading Fortune and Economist, and yeah, those were the two. And fascinated by the .com boom and bust that was kind of happening when I just started at Russell McVeigh in Wellington. So I'm, being a lawyer, I was in intellectual property as well and technology. And so there was definitely interfaces. And I also studied marketing and have a deep, deep love for marketing and consumer behavior. So I think there's an intersection there which did actually lead to the digital element of my career. But no conversations at all in my family about that.
Wow. Okay. And so then, how did you decide what to study at Victoria University?
I think I did law just by default because I have an innate sense of justice is very deep in me and highly argumentative. And so it was kind of obvious that would be a good thing to study. I do vividly remember, I can visualize where I was standing on the stairs at my house when I was younger and my father just going, I pity the judge when you come up in front of them. So I think it was
hilarious.
Kind of just presumed that I would do law. And then commerce, I think that was also, that they're just default good things to study, couldn't go wrong. I actually had this desire I had a little bit of an entrepreneurial startup thing in me. Again, I don't really know where that came from, but there were a few business ideas I had, and one of them was that I wanted to do something in makeup and do some sort of makeup artist thing, which was well before any of the makeup influencers that have now become a massive, massive industry. And I remember my mother just saying, well, you need a good backstop if you're going to go and do something like that. So go get a degree and then figure it out from there. I think she was shocked where 4 years into my career at Russell McVeigh, I did then go, well, there's my backstop, so I'm off.
Yes.
I don't think she probably thought I'd take her literally, but yeah.
And did you do any kind of little entrepreneurial things, or any jobs during your sort of school and university years?
No, nothing interesting at all. I babysat, which basically fueled my Yves Saint Laurent lipstick obsession. was about it. No, I really wasn't. It's odd. I really wasn't one of those. I didn't do young enterprise. Yeah, it didn't seem that interesting to me. I had friends doing it. I don't think they were big enough for me. I definitely wanted to do big things.
Do you recall any particular highlights from your time studying that kind of solidified, different thinking for you?
I don't think there's any particular thing other than just I do love to consume knowledge, and I think that studying And I certainly spent a number of years at university and studied, have a good couple of degrees and a bit to my name. And I don't think that's ever left me. Like, I really do just love absorbing knowledge and thinking. Again, loving AI for that, because I can get a bunch of, pull a bunch of things together and have it help me analyze it, or put something in and get it to give me other sources. And I think that's probably, there are flickers when you ask that question, but I think that the core piece that I got was I just loved the kind of intellectual pursuit of learning, and that's never left me. It's very deep in me.
Now, I guess we're in this world of, where lifelong learning is more encouraged, accepted than ever before. Do you look back on your university education now and think, if I was to do it all again, would you take a different path? Is that, or has your thinking changed much on the role of university as a part of the career and the learning process?
I think that you have to, and I think this is very difficult at that age, but I think what's really important is for you to understand yourself and what your needs are. When you're that age, you're still in such a formative place, and your brain is in such a formative place. And for me, university was an opportunity to learn how to think about things, how to write about things, how to be challenged. I remember being dismissive of somebody who I judged based on how they looked, and then was put in a group session with them and just realised how brilliant they were. And so even that, on a little level, just to not judge people, and just until you can really have a conversation and get to know who they are and how their brain works. So for me, like, when you ask that question, I feel like oh my gosh, no, don't take that away from me. Like, I didn't love tests. Like, I used to have nightmares. I used to literally wake up in the morning like, I'm late for an exam. I still had that till quite late. Like, that took a long time to leave me. But no, I really enjoyed being in university. I think that was right for me.
Yeah.
I think there are a lot of people, it's pressure. A lot of people can't do that pace, and so that's probably not going to be the right thing for them. And it's a bit wasteful if that's not the right thing for you, because it's a number of years that you could be dedicated to doing something else. So I think it's about dedicating yourself to the right craft for you. I think it's so tough at 17 or 18 years old to figure that out. I try and talk to as many young people as I can about that, to take the pressure off them, because it's not going to define who you are at all. So do something you love is my general advice.
So having finished up at university, what did it look like getting into the workforce for you?
Well, I loved the opportunity to wear smart clothes. I thought that was fabulous. I was very fortunate. I applied at Russell McVeigh and actually one other law firm to be a summer clerk, and I got accepted by Russell McVeigh, which was a very business-focused law firm. So it was an amazing fit for me. And I absolutely, I just so loved working there. And it was hard. Again, it was hard, but just because it's hard doesn't mean something can't be fun. Well, it's at least what I tell myself on a daily basis. And so I summer clerked for them, and then I got offered a full-time position when I graduated. And I started off doing a lot of IP. Actually did a lot of like copyright search, very basic stuff, some patent stuff. And then quite quickly, I think because of my general awareness of technology and my interest in IP, kind of got picked up by what was a very early nascent technology team that was developing. I was the Y2K year, so I was doing a number of opinions on what was going to happen on the tick over.
Shall we
2000.
explain that for listeners who wouldn't know what Y2K is?
Exactly. Well, why don't you? You're even more techie than me.
Well, leading up to the year 2000, there were significant concerns that the technology that existed at that time was not built
There was
to
a date stamp.
deal with
There's basically a
dates,
date stamp.
dates clicking over from 1999 into a new millennium.
It
right?
wouldn't go 20. It would go it would go probably 1900.
Yeah, what
versus
would
2000.
happen?
Yeah.
And it was really interesting. I mean, I ended up doing a little Y2K project for a bank in London, but there was a lot going on around will things work and will they not? And even at that time, we had old software that had been built decades before in old languages.
Yeah.
And a lot of money was spent trying to make sure that things didn't blow up, that the electricity didn't turn off around the world on the strike of midnight. But fortunately, it didn't.
No,
it's actually, I've never seen a detailed analysis of whether actually all the investment fixed it or whether it was all going to be okay anyway.
Yeah, no, me either. Actually, it's a good question. It's a great question. There will be people who know, and I know some of the people to ask, so that's a great follow-up for us both to do. I'm sure you know some folks too. So that was fabulous. Did some really interesting oil contracts. There's nothing like going back to a 1954 contract and going, I wonder what they meant for this to mean in 1990.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I love the academic challenge of that. I love contracts. I'm one of the weird people who loves contracting, papering deals, basically. And got to do, I've got a fun story actually. I was given quite a lot of license actually because I was quite good with people, I think, and loved contracts and negotiating, which clearly held me in good stead in future years. And I was really young and I got to negotiate a contract for one of our clients. And I remember going in there and I'm, young female with my, I think, older male client and then male client with a male lawyer on the other side. And I was in there just walking through my steps that I'd prepared and my, the various points that we wanted to clarify effectively. And I got to one point, and nothing was that particularly outrageous. And I got to one point, and the client across the other side of the table just lost his mind and just actually had a full-blown temper tantrum and ended up leaving the room. And I had no idea what to do, so I just sat there quietly because I was like, well, I don't know what to do in this circumstance, so I'm just going to sit here. Well, client came back a little bit sheepish, and then I won every single point in that negotiation from that point on. And I learned this great lesson of just sit there if someone's having a freak out, and they'll probably right themselves, and you'll probably get an advantage as a consequence of it. So it was a lot of fun. Again, hard work, but it was a lot of fun, and it was I would highly recommend. Russell McVeigh do still talk to me even though I left them, which is very kind of them. And they even invite me back to talk about my career, which is very kind of them. And it's not for everyone what I did, but I did choose to leave and have loved it since. But I really enjoyed my time as a lawyer, as a baby lawyer, as I like to call it.
Now, that example that you just shared, can you kind of map that to sort of future scenarios now where you were in situations, similar negotiations where actually because of that real world example there, which tends to stick a lot more than a theoretical situation, that helped you out further down the track?
I think it just gives you a lot of confidence. Like, for me, and going back to the question of would I go to university again, and I think the obvious thing for somebody like me is, or would you start a business up? And it is a tough question, that because now what I know about business is, I had a great time. But I think that you gain a level of confidence, professional confidence, that from an experience like that, it was very intense. And I'm quite hard to phase in those circumstances as a consequence because I was so young when I had that experience. I was so imposter syndrome, up the wazoo. It was all imposter syndrome. And that you can navigate that and come out the other side. I think it gave me a lot of professional confidence and just a knowledge that, and I think with all negotiations, I very just calmly walk through them because I'm actually the point of that story is not actually that I won every point on the back end of that negotiation. It's actually that there was nothing controversial in that negotiation. And for some reason, this person lost their mind and in that moment. And I'm sure it was life pressure. Like I'm sure something was going on for them and they got triggered about something. And it was just, I actually don't think it was anything to do with that negotiation. And so I think it just gives you an ability to be a bit unemotional when you're in a business setting.
And you need to have that resilience, don't you? Because,
Yes.
people have things going on in their lives.
Yes.
And those things will show up in whatever environment that you're in, right?
Yeah. I think that's such an important point, and it's one that I do a lot of mentoring and hopefully support a lot of young female, especially founders, but young founders generally. And I think often I get this like, I don't understand why this person's doing X or why they haven't got back to me. And I'm always trying to teach the lesson of you just don't know what's going on for that person. And someone can be rough with you or short with you or difficult with you, all of the things. And I really do try to hold a huge amount of empathy and compassion for people because people have some tough stuff going on in the background that they rightly don't need to be sharing with us in a business setting. And so, look, if someone's being a complete dick and trying to, run over you, you've got to stand your ground, absolutely. But I do try to lead with compassion for sure.
Yeah. Now, 4 years at Russell McVeigh, walk us through how you got from, having your focus on working for Russell McVeigh, and then working through that. Actually, that season was over, and it's time to move on to a bigger and brighter future.
It's such a good question because I think that we all seek clarity in decisions like that, particularly big ones. And I don't think I had any concrete clarity, but I had this sense, and I think I am intuitive on the Myers-Briggs. I balance that with a lot of structured thinking and logic and all the rest of it, but I do get the feelings and I know how to think them through. And I just had this sense that I didn't want to be on this side of the negotiating table. I wanted to be on the other side.
Yes.
I wanted to be doing the deals.
Yep.
And I think it was a number of different, from papering some cool technology things for people to helping negotiate and think through the structure for some people with their businesses, that I just had this compound of fabulous experiences that made me want to be the fabulous one and not the person drafting the contract. As fabulous as I think contract drafting is, and I still do, and I still say to teams, to the boards I'm on, I say to the teams, you give me a contract, I'm going to read it. And I'm going to question you on it. So if you don't want deep thoughts on a contract, don't put it in the board papers. So I do still just, I love the expression of a business arrangement in that language, in that form, for whatever reason. It's very weird as I say it out loud.
Yeah, I mean, these are the things that, it's these unique things, right, that become part of our makeup that allow us to be able to, each person to be able to bring something unique to a situation and create something that nobody else could create or see it in a different way.
I think also, actually, I was just processing that. I think it's how I understand a business. So because that's my formative experience of here's a business arrangement or here's a business, we put it into a contract, it ends up being how I understand a deal better than a PowerPoint, better than a business plan, better than a spreadsheet. That's actually how which is and I always think we've all got our languages that we understand things through. Some people it'll be coding, some people it will be a spreadsheet. So I think that's just, it's my love language. It's my
really
business language.
That's fascinating. And I have seen circumstances where people are much more interested in the contract than any of the other aspects, and so
it can get weird.
There we
but
go.
Yes,
yeah. Now it is demystified.
Yeah, I try not to be too weird about it for sure. Yeah.
So what did you have in your mind? What were you visualizing when you were preparing to exit and you were, putting things together in your mind, what was that first kind of picture
Yeah.
that you had, or the first contract you had, or however you visualize?
So I know you're clearly a pattern recognition person, as am I. That's why I can see it in you, and you're trying to see the puzzle pieces of my career coming together. And so that's a great question, because there are a few things that are going to come together here. So I mentioned that I had a bit of a Yves Saint Laurent lipstick obsession that became a MAC Cosmetics obsession when MAC Cosmetics came to New Zealand. And partially that was also because their website, back in the early days, we had to actually type in the website, kids. Their website was phenomenal. They were one of the people who really got online very, very quickly and just did a phenomenal job. And so I had this thing of a love of cosmetics generally, but also a real reverence for this brand's use of technology. And then I got to know the brand more and had a real reverence for the brand, because it's quite an indie brand. It came from Canada. There's a whole backstory to it. So huge interest there. And then you've got my interest in the .com boom and bust, and you've got my desire to be a makeup artist floating around in the background, and what I wanted to do there. All of that actually started to come together, and I thought that I was going to go to New York and I was going to get a job at MAC Cosmetics, and I was going to redefine the way they sold makeup I had this whole system I'd figured out, and that's what I was going to go to New York and do. I was going to go from law to marketing. I was going to go into the cosmetics industry. I was going to move from Wellington to New York. None of this makes sense now. This was very pipe dream, but I had this big presentation. I actually door knocked and managed to get a number of interviews at MAC, had quite a few conversations with them. 9/11 happened just as I left New Zealand and went to New York. So the city was struggling. No one was really up for taking a lot of risk. And so despite, I think, doing some quite good networking and having some good ideas, that didn't happen. And I like to say that technology grabbed me back, because technology always grabs me back. I've learned not to resist it now, and I, fully fledged card carrying nerd, but technology grabbed me, and I ended up working for the company that then became massive, which is where all of the entrepreneurial journeys started. But back to your question, there was just this unusual conflux of inputs and inspiration that led me to thinking that New York was where I needed to be for a very, very specific purpose.
Yes. And so, walk us through the massive story.
Yeah.
Because this was an incredible, achievement and success. What was done there over a reasonably short space of time, right?
Yeah.
And then the acquisition by Microsoft.
Yeah.
So
it's an incredibly long and detailed story that I can go into quite a degree of specifics on. So I'll do the high level, and then you can pick up what you want to delve into. But there was a Kiwi there that I met who was working with an Aussie and said, come chat with us, because I was at this, you move to New York and you think the cat's meow. You think you're pretty awesome. Yeah. You go to New York and you do a bunch of door knocking, and it's winter and it sucks and it's difficult, and then you start to feel a bit, depressed about yourself. And so anyway, through the whole chatting to the Kiwi network, met this Aussie, and he was the head of marketing for this company called Metis Technologies. And I went and chatted with him, and we got on, and he said, well, I could really use some help. And I said, well, I could just really use something to do. I'm a bit bored and used to working hard. So what do you need done? And so ended up helping them out on various this, that, and the next thing, and just said, look, I'm just happy to work for free. Just it's fine. I'm, perfectly able to support myself for the time being. And that turned into a job. And not only did it turn into a job, but actually as I was doing all of this stuff for them, which included rewriting marketing materials, helping them with some of their legal stuff, their HR, like I was pretty capable. I had a pretty wide range. And we would go for these coffees, and I was like, what is actually going on here? Like it was peer-to-peer network integration software. Like IBM was a major competitor. I was starting to do the math on this thing, and I was like, I don't know, is this going to work? He's like, no, I don't think. So we had these chats, like, where's this all going? And so we had an idea to pivot the business into a testing tool in the video game industry, which is quite the pivot. It's about as big a pivot as moving from Wellington as a lawyer to going to New York thinking that you could work in the cosmetics industry. And so we thought this through and figured it out and effectively presented to the investors this idea that there's no way this was going to work. We actually felt we could utilize the technology as part of the pivot and move it into this testing tool. We actually got the support of the board to do that. I remembered I had to run down every single last investor on the cap table and actually physically find them, which was quite a piece of work to get them to transfer the stock over to a new company. The massive URL was actually in my name. Like found it, bought it, grabbed it, because we needed it. And my name's on the patent. Like it's all of the really grassrootsy stuff. It's all very basic. Back then, when you started, it was all very basic. And we did that and built this testing tool. So it was it's a piece of hardware which I knew nothing about. I mean, I knew vaguely something about software. I could pretend I knew something about hardware, but I didn't really. And we went out and we shopped it to the video game publishers, and they were like, "Oh no, we're not going to do that. We're not going to." The testing piece is a really, really important part of the process. We can't rely on hardware. We can't rely on hardware and software to do that. We need humans to do the testing. And so we're like, "Oh."
So how far down the track were you?
We had a physical piece of hardware.
Yeah, so you'd spent a long chunk of a lot of effort to kind of put that together, even if it happened quite quickly.
It happened quite quickly, but we had put quite a bit of effort into it. And I look back now and I think that we were nuts because even just getting the electrical compliance certification, like I started to look at that and I was like, oh, this is not going to be fun. So I think we got served a bit of a lucky break, to be honest, on that. And anyway, as we got to know, because Australian and a Kiwi, we were, good at chatting. And it was Mitch who came up with the idea. He was just like, we need to advertise. We need to do an advertising network. We were like, oh yeah, that seems like a good idea. That makes sense. And we just struck gold with that idea because it was at the exact time that the male to 18 to 34 audience had disappeared off of watching cable network television. They'd stopped buying newspapers a long time ago. They weren't really consuming magazines. It was really hard to market to them. But they were a really valuable demographic. And so there was this big kind of where are the lost boys, as they talked about. And we were like, well, we know where they are and we can get you access to them. And so it wasn't straightforward. And again, I could go into endless detail about convincing publishers to put advertising in their video games. Actually, they were easy to convince because that's just dollars, but it's the developers.
Money in their pocket.
Yeah, money. And it was the developers, though, who you had to just be like, well, we're going to enhance the game and think how great ads are going to be because they bring a dynamic element into the game. And, they actually worked in the video game. The audience, the players actually loved the ads. They actually did like that there were these ads that were dynamic and back in the day that were dynamic and changing. So, we pivoted into that and got really lucky. And there were a number of, I actually did a talk, I think it was at Morgo that I did how I learned to be lucky. And I think that obviously you work hard and we all know that you work hard and you create your own luck. But I do also think you've got to get a little bit lucky, or you've certainly got to be clever enough to see where the open doors are and not just sit staring at the closed doors.
Well, there's so many aspects to it, isn't it? Part of it is the timing. Part of it is what you were hearing through those varying conversations. Yeah. Part of it was the knowledge that you had to be able to see how you could commercialize the opportunity. Yeah. And it's all those things coming together. Yeah. And then having the spark to really see it and to be able to execute and pull it all off. Easier said than
But also,
done,
it's just there are some things that you're just like, well, that's curious because I mentioned my love of marketing and consumer behavior.
Yes.
Like, oh, well, thank you. What a gift. This is fun. Like it did get to a point where watching advertising started to feel like work, but good work, great work.
Yeah. Now, I always think the best learnings often come through those tougher times. You've just walked us through, a couple of pivot scenarios. When you look back on those times where it's like, oh, actually, this maybe isn't working so well, and so on. Like, how difficult was that for yourself and others within the business, or did it all just flow naturally?
Oh,
and
it's so
it was
easy.
all super easy? Because I'm sure it wasn't.
There are so many elements to that. And, I remember vividly one moment where we needed to get another round, a funding round away. And, I say we struck gold, but there's a big difference between that and investors throwing money at you. And we were really down to the wire on the funding round. And I remember sitting in the office and looking around and going, there are people here with mortgages that they won't be able to pay their mortgage payment if I can't get this funding round locked and loaded. There are a lot of tough business things, but thinking that through in your head, that was there are those moments that you're just like, this is important. This is not, I'm not playing here. I'm certainly playing with people's lives if I am. So, there were a ton. Everything's hard. I think that's the point. Like, this isn't. These things are not straight shots, and you've got to enjoy the challenge and finding the way through that challenge becomes what I think you become really, really good at. Fronting the hard days, dealing with them. I'd like to think that I'm pretty good in a crisis. Like not to jump forward, but, I took on the chair role of Serco basically as the pandemic hit because our board chair couldn't do it. He was not well. And, I didn't think it. I just said, of course. Somebody's got to do it. You're asking me to do it. Of course I'll do it. Yeah. And then you just get in there. And I remember having a moment going, why am I not freaking out about this? And I was like, because this is what I do. I do hard things. We were talking about the hard thing about hard things, Ben Horowitz's book. Yeah. And but just that was like therapy, that book. Yeah. So I think that's a big piece of it. And the other thing that I've gone back to as I've become more philosophical later in my life is when I was 16, I had an operation that should have gone. It was early days of laparoscopic, which is keyhole surgery for people who know anything about that. But I was like number 5 or something in Wellington, something like that, for this surgery to happen. And it went wrong and they cut a major artery and it was not good. And I think, and because of that, I had to fight back. I had to fight back in my 6th form year. I had to study, had a month out because of that, and then I had to catch up on all my exams and had amazing teachers who really, really supported me through that, but I fought for that. And I think from that, nothing's ever going to be as challenging as that in your life, right? When you're dealing with something physical and when you're young. But also from that, I'm like, I just work harder and I fight. Of course that's what I do. That's the way you get through crisis moments. Yeah. So I think I just learnt that early, and so I have a lot of fight in me.
And what did those situations teach you about working with others and the importance of bringing others along on that journey? Because it's very much not just going to work if it's just you that's fighting, right?
Yeah, 100%. And it's a great question. You have to work through a team, and that's about all of you feeling like you can win in the fight. You will typically have some people who can't step up on the level that you would like them to or that you are. And again, we're all different and we're all at different stages and levels, and we've all got different capabilities for all of the various reasons. And I think what it comes down to is figuring out how you optimally can work as a team and what each person in that team can assume in terms of responsibility and wants to assume. And ultimately getting alignment around where you're going is so important. It's one of those things people say, but I'm like a sniffer dog, a truffle dog sniffing for truffles with alignment, because making sure you're completely clear about what direction you're going and why. And I think the why is really important, and I'll come back to that. But getting that alignment as a team is really important. And I think also being very, very careful about what expectations you're putting on people, because you'll fall apart if you're not aligned, and you'll fall apart if you expect more of people than they're able to give. And I think there's something beautiful about figuring out how to work as a team. It's a very cool thing when it's happening, and when it's not. And it's a lot of hard work to get that to happen. But yeah, it's not just one person fighting, but I can put a lot on my shoulders.
And so how have you brought alignment within the team? What would have been your approaches over the years that you've landed on to help get everybody in the same direction? I think
that I'll come back to I'll start with the why and then dig around a couple of other things. So I think I've always loved the Simon Sinek kind of why. I think hopefully everyone's seen that, but really understanding what that singular thing is that you're trying to do. I love a single-minded proposition. Like, I love a real clarity about, we are doing this. We know we are winning when we are here. And you can have these like terrible strategy days where everyone's sitting there and navel gazing and pontificating and what ifing. And you can have these great galvanizing strategy days where you're getting crystal clear on what that why is. And I remember early on, even with Massive, and this is carried through into every business I've worked on myself and that I've worked with others on, is what is your thesis about the future and how are you going to win? And I even love adding to that, like, what is it that you see and you believe about the future that other people might not see and might not believe that you're working towards? And when you get real clarity around that, there's just this, I don't know, this magical thing that happens. And from there, you all figure out what your piece of moving towards that is. And more recently, and when I say more recently, it's probably in the last 10 years that I discovered the OKR framework, objectives and key results. And I think that beautifully articulates how to do that well. And I'm quite a purist with OKRs, which drives most people nuts that I work with on them. But there's a complexity that you work through to get to simplicity with OKRs that I do think codifies that magic, starting from what is our mission? Like, what are we here to do? What is our thesis? What is our unreasonable thesis about where we're going to be in the future? And then distilling down from there your objectives, your key results, your initiatives, and then that regular cadence of reviewing them, and the flexibility of OKRs where you can change them if you're needing to course correct as you navigate to that future. That's probably, the biggest piece of this. And when you truly do that well, and I don't think the large majority of companies get this, when you truly do this well, down to the receptionist at the front desk understands their part in moving towards that ridiculous view of the future. And I hold that out as the holy grail, actually. And that, for me, is the best. It's actually the best expression and the best answer to your question. So that's kind of the why piece and the strategy, and then distilling it into the framework to allow everyone to be part of the team. There'll be other things, but I got so absorbed in my OKRs. It was my beautiful mind moment.
Measure What Matters for those who are
Measure What Matters, John Dewar. Yeah. It's a brilliant book.
The book or the audio book.
Yeah. He narrates I haven't listened. I've read it a few times, but I think he narrates it, and I'm sure he does an outstanding job of that narration.
Yeah. Oh, it's really good.
It's a good one. We're going to put that on the list. We've got the hard things about hard things on the list, and I haven't talked about thinking fast and slow yet, but we will get there. That will come up.
So there's only, we've only got limited time. So
is that your shorthand for I'm giving far too long?
No, it's not actually. But I'm just thinking
where to.
I'm interested in the exit from Massive, which, as is commonly the case, you don't just sort of drop a business and run, right? So there must be some pretty interesting learnings from that period of going through having to negotiate with Microsoft, and then a period inside
the beast,
a really really big company that at times has, as every business does, but has had some significant dysfunction inside. So I'm curious what you would like to or are willing to share on that.
I don't want to get myself into too much trouble.
Oh, long time's passed. You won't get into any trouble.
I've still got friends that might have concerns. Look,
you don't have to mention names.
There will be names
Give us
named.
the good
no,
stories.
I'm joking. Look, we successfully, I think, set ourselves up for an exit. Again, I'm going to call that equal parts luck and equal parts hard work. But we were fortunate with our timing in that business. I'd modelled it out a number of times and I didn't like where it got to when I modelled it. So when Microsoft bought us, there was quite a bit of a sigh of relief. But I think you do this as an entrepreneur. I think you wake up some mornings like, yeah, we're going to smash all our goals. And then other mornings you wake up and you're like, we're doomed. This is never going to work. So we got lucky there. And we tried a number of times to have conversations with Microsoft from a ventures standpoint, and it kind of never went anywhere. And I've actually never inquired, and I will inquire because I should, what the wake up moment was. But effectively, we again got lucky because there was a big push to acquire. When we were acquired, there was a general acquisitions are a great idea. There's a lot of good startups out there. I think Microsoft got that bug as well. We made a lot of sense to them because we were an ad network. It was a real compliment with what they were trying to do. Yada, yada, yada. We were kind of on their radar and then got very on their radar. We were lucky that it was a bit frothy at the time and got acquired quite actually, relatively speaking, seamlessly, given how difficult those kinds of negotiations and exits can be. It's funny to me because that part of it is such a blur because at this stage there's so much going on. You half think it might happen, you half negotiating with other people to hold up the price, and there's a bunch of things going on. And then suddenly, one day you're announcing in a conference room that Microsoft's acquired you and everyone's clapping and you're like, hang on a minute, is this a dream? And it still feels a bit fugue state to me. It still does feel a little bit like it was like a dream moment. And people expect me to have this clarity about that moment.
Yeah.
But it's the end of a process that you've done many processes before. You don't know if it's going to be a thing, so you just kind of work through it clinically, I guess. And then it happens. And the weird thing about real success is that it's almost too intangible to grasp. You almost come back to the mundane as a way of dealing with lifing because that you've just exited to Microsoft. And I didn't really know what that meant. Like now, we all know, we all talk about exits, we all talk about startups, we all talk about this stuff, but you've got to remember this was really early days with this. This is early 2000s. I'm like that old that I remember when Twitter started. It's just, So it was incredible. I then remember what happens then is actually you then feel ripped off because they're trying to change everything about your business, which is what acquirers do. So the worst thing was when they tried to swap out our coffee machine, which just should be illegal.
What?
And I remember that being like a major issue of like, why are you forcing this? This is ridiculous. Like that it got to that level of little bits and pieces that they were trying to shift about our operation. So it's made me really conscious now when we are acquiring through various of my businesses, like other businesses, to try and keep that culture intact and the importance of that. I think we've moved on since then. Again, this was the early frothy days of acquisition, but we're probably still learning.
Microsoftize everything, so they had a system for how they
we had to book
buy coffee and coffee machines,
book travel and put leave requests, like all this dumb stuff that we never worried about because I guess they wanted us to be a grown-up business, and we're like, but we're not. We're a startup.
Because
We
how big were
do
you
things our way.
at that point?
We had like 140 people, so
Right,
decent.
and they're pushing sort of systems on you that are
Yeah.
suiting a business with 140,000.
Exactly.
Yeah,
So anyway, it's silly, but you do feel a lot of your freedom and your control has gone, and it's one of the things that I love about being in startup world is that you do feel, and I think it's important for humans actually to feel a bit of that. So I don't love that oppressive top down. It's important. I promote it a lot with my governance hat on, but I think where you can, giving people optionality and letting people be grown ups is a lot of it. But we had that. But on the flip side, the promise of Microsoft was incredible. Like here I am suddenly working for Microsoft. Like that's a big deal. Again, I don't know that I really realized how big of a deal it was when I was, but you're part of this big machine. It's very impressive. They had quite a big vision for where we would go with them, which was quite exciting. Never got anywhere near it, but it was exciting at the time. So trying to figure out how to do that, how to scale on a new level. You get access that you'd never had before. You'd had to fight as a startup, and then suddenly like Microsoft's like, oh yeah, we've got that. Here, you want this? Like it just. That was fascinating, and it's comfortable. It's very, very comfortable working somewhere like Microsoft. Like suddenly you're working hard, but you've got a job and insurance and all of these things that I used to have to figure out what our health insurance was, and suddenly they're just giving it to me. It was like, oh, that's nice, thank you. And let me tell you, it's one of the best insurance policies in the US. It certainly was in the US. There are other people doing well there now too. So it was very different. It was very, very different.
How different were your goals? So you talked about they acquire you and then they've got this exciting vision.
Yeah.
How different was that from what you had before, and how well did that transition come across or not?
I think what you recognise a little slowly and then quite quickly is that they're thinking here, but they're pushing the teams to here.
Right. So
quite
much bigger picture.
Yeah.
In terms of,
it's almost like there was a lot of busy work. And it's not that was the case, but there's suddenly a lot of strategy, and there's a lot of overthinking about our China strategy, and there's a lot of should we, shouldn't we do that. There was just a lot of slow moving. You're used to in startups, I call it, throwing stuff against the wall and seeing if it sticks. That's your methodology intelligently, and, I'm being a bit blasé, but you're used to just dipping your toe in the water, seeing what's going on, and then calibrating off the back of that. And actually it's actually a very scientific process, the experimentation process. It's become quite a big way that we work in tech. But Microsoft wasn't working that way. They were very strategic, very, very smart people. I mean, some of the smartest people I've got to work with. But then your overthinking starts, your paralysis through analysis begins. You're so big, nobody really wants to stick their neck out and take a massive, so there's a lot of that going on. And honestly, it was wonderful. They're very, very smart people, incredible privilege and honour to work there. But I just ended up feeling bored. Is really what it was. And so I was doing a lot of travel, and I just said to them, look, I don't think I need to be in New York anymore. And so I moved to Boulder, Colorado, which was this great, felt a little bit Kiwi-ish inside of the US. And they were like, we don't mind where you are as long as you've got by a main airport. That's not. So they were really good about that. And then I just slowly got the itch again to go into startup land. So left Microsoft, and my husband jokes I took 2 days off and then started another company, which is pretty right, actually. So yeah, it's interesting how, and this is where Squiggly was born from, my Squiggly philosophy, which is, that you should actively cultivate discomfort, because that's where the good stuff happens. It's interesting how boring I find being comfortable. I like solving problems, and if I don't have problems to solve, I'm gonna get restless leg syndrome, restless brain syndrome. Yeah.
And so what did it look like to find and solve the next series of problems?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to say we wasn't changing the world with my digital advertising companies. But crowdsourcing was the big thing. You'll remember the big thing. Yeah. And Jeff Howe, right? He wrote the book Crowdsourcing. I'm pretty sure that's right. And I had this coffee. My husband literally said, because I said to him, I'm bored. And he was like, and I'd finished up, or I was finishing up. I forget the timing. But he said, you should meet my friend's husband. I think you guys will get on really well. So we went and met with him, John Windsor, and we met at a coffee shop in Boulder, the Trident Cafe, which is very cool. I don't know if it's still around, but it was very cool. And we started talking about crowdsourcing, and then brains just started pinballing. And I literally said, this is brilliant. We should start a business basically doing advertising through crowdsourcing. This is a genius model. I went home and wrote the business plan, and then we met again and shopped it to a couple of VCs and got extraordinarily lucky and got funded the second VC meeting on this. It was, and look, it's again, you work hard, you get lucky. You know, he'd had an incredible career. It was very, very smart, very strategic, very well regarded. So he had great creds, and then I was coming in with my experience, and you know, the intersection of crowdsourcing and advertising just made complete sense, and we had a business plan that was making money pretty quickly, and the VC looked at us and said, somebody's going to do this, and if anyone can pull this off, you guys can. And so it was, you know,
fantastic.
Got in there. Yeah. So that ruined me, because I then decided that all startups from then on would be that way, and they have not been, particularly as a female founder. But that one was incredible, and just I knew exactly what to do. Like Victors and Spoils, starting that was just like, for me, was just this painting by numbers thing, because I just knew every step of the way what we need. Not suggesting there weren't hard things, there always are, but it was just very, very clear to me, how to build that business.
And because you were doing something that I'm picking that there wasn't really anybody else doing it.
Not when we started.
What did that mean for winning the big clients? Because the clients that you brought on board were not, you know, just little local firms. I mean, these were the household names, right?
Yeah.
Maybe you can tell us the clients that you attracted.
We had Harley Davidson, we had Coca-Cola, we had Nike, we had Oprah Winfrey, we had
nuts.
It was nuts. It was nuts. And it was they all wanted to experiment. They all really appreciated the idea of having people who were fans and freelancers or creative dabblers. You know, there was a wide range. The story was great. And one of the things we got for Harley Davidson literally came from someone who's like a diehard fan of Harley Davidson. And just the ideation that you get out of that was just phenomenal and very, very exciting. And so...
You remember what that was?
Yeah, I think that was No Cages, but we did a number of campaigns for Harley Davidson, okay. So I'm forgetting exactly which one.
Okay.
Like I got confused. Our name, Victors and Spoils, we didn't crowdsource that. Evan came up with that, who's our head of creative, who's brilliant. But we crowdsourced the logo, which was very, very cool. So
that's a good example then for your clients, right?
Where
you've got the
100%. We've done it for
ourselves.
eating our own dog food.
Yeah.
And there's this other amazing story about this woman who I forget where she was, but just in one of those remote territories in Eastern Europe kind of thing. And she had a winning campaign with Coca-Cola and got to put Coca-Cola like on her. You know, it's just cool. They were just real stories, very real stories, and they were easy to sell into clients. They loved the breadth of the ideation. They loved that they were getting unique ideas, and it was a cheaper way of operating because we didn't have a bunch of creatives sitting around that we needed to feed, and they're expensive. So it was amazing to be in such a creative space. Yeah.
Tell us around what that journey with Victor and Spoils was like. You ultimately, exited by selling to an ad agency, but as a business, you were really, probably quite disruptive to the existing industry. And look, we've seen that over the years that, often it's the disruptors who end up getting acquired by those that they're working to disrupt.
Yeah. there are a couple of certainly elements of learnings from Victors and Spoils, and one of them was actually, and I loved all of the creative people I worked with at Victors and Spoils. It's not a negative on them, but it was interesting seeing that we were trying to break the model of creative development, but they'd grown up much the same way I grew up writing contracts a certain way, telling me that you could do law through AI, which of course you can, and it's a great idea, but that would be a bit of an existential crisis to me as a lawyer. And so trying to navigate that level of change with the creatives who were part of our business meant that we actually ended up boxing ourselves in a little bit more than the big vision I had for Victors and Spoils to start with, because I saw this mechanized way that you could, as a mom and pop shop or a big Nike, you could just go in and go, I want this campaign, and then this mechanism would kick off and deliver you an ad at the end of it. There was a lot that was going to be hard about doing that, but that's kind of what was in my head. And so that became difficult to do. So you could see that we were getting a bit confined in ourselves in the way advertising is done. And then as another layer on top of that, we started to get confined by the advertising industry. And so I find this fascinating for people who are coming in with startup ideas where they're like, we're going to disrupt, blah, blah, because it does make a lot of sense. The way that old industry is doing things is typically really old and inefficient, and there are better ways of doing it, but that doesn't mean that the incumbents aren't going to fight you tooth and nail to retain, their monopolistic, hold over the industry.
Exactly.
So we started to find, as we got bigger and bigger and more notoriety, the ad agencies came after us harder. So we would be in these competitive pitches. We would know that our work was outstanding, and you'd get this response of we didn't give it to you, we gave it to blah, blah. And this kind of backhand, you knew that the agency monster had grabbed them and told them top down, no, Victors and Spoils are not getting that piece of work. So we definitely kept coming up with this. There was a limit that we could get to in terms of being successful in disrupting the ad industry. But there were agencies who wanted to hold themselves out as being innovative and edgy and cool and with it and, all the rest of it. And so Havas Worldwide were one of them. And to their credit, were absolutely trying to play with new models. And so they ended up acquiring us, which just felt like the right thing to do because we could see that we were getting to the ceiling, the glass ceiling, basically, and it was just looking very difficult to crack through. So we exited to them, and I was all in for the next stage with Havas. So they're headquartered in France, and how much would trips to Paris really suck? Not a lot, blah, blah, blah. And then suddenly just had this muscle memory of the end of the time with Microsoft, and I realized, no, I don't want to do this. This is going to bore me really quickly. And actually the smart thing to do for everyone is actually for me to jump out now. There was somebody who could easily come through and do the business development arm of what I did, and we didn't need the founder piece anymore. So yeah, I stepped out of that. And so glad I did, because it just gave me a bit of freedom to then kind of go, who am I? What do I want to do next? And having that break actually gave me the room to come up with my kind of life/startup philosophy, which is the squiggly life. And that's just all about life not moving forward in progressive measured steps. There is no linear, and it's a lot messier, and it's squiggly, and we move forwards, we move sideways, and we move backwards. And most of the time it's sideways and backwards. And I look at the world we're in now, and it's hyper squiggly. It's the way I'm absorbing, the AI transformation.
Yes, there's no straight lines,
no,
is there?
No. Yeah. And actually, the more you dig into science, health, injury recovery, everything, you'll just start to see it's not linear. It's not linear. It's not it's incredible how many times people actually say it's not linear, which really does cause me to question why we think it is linear. It's so obviously not. But I do deeply believe this is trained into us as young children, and that's that formative experience that we think it will, because it does when you're younger, but that doesn't bear out. Yeah.
And so you entered this whole new period. Tell us
Right.
what that's looked like now for you, the last sort of decade and a
Yeah.
half, where you haven't been tied down just to
Yeah.
one startup and
Yeah.
and so on. You've really been involved with and helped lots of organizations at a whole lot of different levels, from
Babies.
small to the biggest.
Yeah. It's been crazy. I do remember wondering when I left Victors and Spoils, like, what is the next thing for me? Like, I in a way felt like I was outgrowing the chaos of being a startup entrepreneur. I still have such a soft spot for it, but you are dominated by a business like that when you found a business. So, had that curiosity and kind of met and talked with a lot of people as I was scratching the surface of that question, and ended up going and working with NZTE in LA and running North America for New Zealand Trade and Enterprise for 3 years, which I did because they asked me to, and I did because I felt like it was a give back to New Zealand. And I also did it because I thought that my startup, and this is Pete Crisp, and I had conversations about this when I came on board, my way of looking at being scrappy and doing something new and being part of the US and early OKR thinking before I even understood what the OKRs were, really gave a different way of operating NZTE in that market, and that was kind of the challenge they wanted me to bring. So that was really amazing and so great to connect with all of these New Zealand companies. And really, from leaving Victors and Spoils to now, I've just slowly been consumed by Aotearoa and the business community here, such that 4.5 years ago, I moved back here in the middle of the pandemic, and I'm now on 4 boards and, as you say, mentor and have assisted literally countless businesses and like to think, and I think it's generally understood, that I've been part of supporting the development of the technology and entrepreneurial ecosystem in New Zealand, along with many others. But yeah, it's been incredible, and it is phenomenal to stand back and see where we are now in New Zealand with technology and startups and all of the incredible, phenomenal, Rocket Lab to Halter to OpenStar to Sharesies to just the names fall out now, and back in the day there just wasn't that. And so to have been part of supporting that again, along with many, many other people, it's just such an honour. And now that I get to bring this kind of future thinking and disruptive thinking and all of the other curiosities of my brain to the big businesses I'm working with is also phenomenal, and a real opportunity to help scale, helping humans be humans and do great human work, particularly now that we've got robots that can do some of the really boring, mundane stuff. And I hope that is where the story ends with AI. And not super intelligence, but there is a big question mark there.
Yes, yeah, there certainly is. And
cue the next 3-hour podcast interview.
It's a big rabbit hole to
too big
to jump down. Now, what would you say? Because there'll be some people listening in from varying parts of the world who, they were born in New Zealand or grew up in New Zealand, but they're now sitting somewhere else in the world. And they're probably quite happy in, London, New York,
Amsterdam,
Tokyo,
wherever.
All of these places around, the world where there are Kiwis and thousands of them doing amazing things. Yeah. What's your encouragement around, getting behind New Zealand, whether it's from somewhere else in the world or what it's been like for you to move back to New Zealand?
Yeah, it's a big question. And the first thing I would say is the bulk of those Kiwis you're referencing are in some way, shape, or form supporting New Zealand business. I certainly see that on a daily basis. There's actually a cool WhatsApp group I'm part of called how do you say that? Diaspora. Thank you. Which is just incredible. Kiwis kind of everywhere supporting each other, and a lot of that US focused. But they are all, if you ask any of them for help on anything, they will be right there supporting any business. So there is a massive amount of support that we get already. There's a lot of people who come back here regularly and do, short tours of duty as well. So that works. That model works. We're lucky enough to have Dr. Sean Gawley on our board at Serco, who I conned somehow to join the board, and he's just been phenomenal. He lives in the US, but is very, very keen to support, the growth of New Zealand tech businesses. So a lot of that is happening. In terms of doing what I've done, there's an argument on both sides of that. I miss being part of the really big market, and I think that there is a wisdom and an exposure you get from being in that market that you can bring back to New Zealand when you're not here full time. I like to challenge myself and think that I'm getting good access to that, but it's just not the same. So there is a trade-off in moving back here. But on the flip side, moving back here has given me connectivity to founders on the ground who sometimes just, because I'm here, feel closer to me and feel like, they can. I've had a bunch of them up to my house. I had a strategy day at my house beginning of this week with one of the companies came up and just took over my house to have their strategy day. Like, there's pieces like that you can do that are they're just different to when you're offshore. I think both work. I really do think both work. And I ultimately, you said there's a lot of people who are quite happy. If you are quite happy offshore, then stay happy would be my advice. But there's some benefits to coming back here. Some of them are obvious and some of them are a bit hidden and they take a while to reveal themselves. But it's been a good move and I'm loving the work I'm doing, and I definitely wouldn't want to move back to the US right now. So I'm quite happy that I'm in New Zealand.
Fantastic. Before we wrap up, what can you share about working in, say, on the boards of larger businesses and how that works or doesn't work as somebody who's founded disruptive startups, and then you find yourself part of a big business. Might not quite be a Microsoft, but there's a very tangible sort of difference between the small and fast and the big and slow.
It all goes back to your question about team, and I'm not going to pretend for a second that I wasn't the most impatient person sitting on these boards to begin with. It was too slow. It wasn't right. It was, why don't they get it? Audit and risk meetings are boring. All of those things as you start out in a governance journey. But you realize quite quickly that you need to learn to influence and you need to learn to ask great questions that enable the executive team to broaden their minds and to think about the hard questions themselves, and also equally think about how they're doing that with their teams. So you're kind of modeling a behavior that you want them to take back and have cascade through the organization, because once that's happening and you get alignment, to go back to the alignment point, it doesn't matter the size of the organization. Any organization can get itself to move in the right direction. The thing I have a really hard time with is this term called politics. And I am not going to pretend that I understand it in the slightest, but the little I understand of it is that there is this thing called self-interest that often plays through in organizations, and people get a bit positional and entrenched in their thinking and hardwired to not move. I find that very, very difficult. I am going to say, though, humans are humans, and we do, I think, need to have compassion first. So I try to go to, well, what is it about the culture that's doing that? Well, what is it about the industry that's doing that? What is it about our reward structure that's doing that? So I try to dig under that when I see it happening. But it is the one thing that I'll get really triggered by is people just wanting to, it's not even that they want to be, it's that their orientation is a little immovable. And I can have a bit of a hard time with that because I'm so oriented to change. I am also on the other side and I have to learn to be patient, apparently.
So one thing that seems to come up time and time again is that within certain organizations, the systems, the reward structures don't seem to encourage a kind of longer term, futurist, strategic, bias for action. All these things that should be there, and it's about the next quarter. It's about the next quarter and the next quarter, and one at a time, and so on. Have you got any thoughts you can share on that front?
I think this ends up being the board's job, actually. I think New Zealand's in a much better place than the US, which is very earnings to earnings. You're buffered by that, and there are some great examples of companies who are going against that tide, and I think Jeff Bezos did a great job of that at Amazon, actually. But by and large, that is something that I think the board can decide that we're going to take the hit of investors being displeased with us today to model out where we're working to. And I think that, investors are smart people. If you can show what you're building and you can show traction and you can show that you're making smart decisions, they will have a degree of patience. It's not going to be endless, but they will have, certainly my experience in New Zealand is they will have patience. Less so our friends across the pond, but certainly in New Zealand they will have patience. So I think that as a board you can buffer that to a degree. The team has to then do the hard work, though, to show all of those things. So that becomes the team's job. And yes, we can encourage that. But I think underneath your question is this, and I get very frustrated with meeting culture, there is this rhythm of doing business that is very oriented to just being busy. And I get how hard it is to come out of that trap. Like, it is hard work, undeniably. But I think actually that's the work that has to happen now, because it's the imperative with the technology shifts we're seeing. But B, it's fundamentally mundane for the humans in our businesses. So I'm loving the work that every business I'm involved in is doing in that regard. I get so much inspiration from the young businesses I work with and how they think about it and how they do things differently. And I keep saying to them, you are our future, you are the model, like keep pushing on this stuff and trying to learn little bits from them that we can bring into the big businesses. But we've got some awesome people in our big businesses. And so in many ways, we also just have to ask them, what do you need so that you can do this, so that you can think about the future? And again, there's a big spotlight on it right now. So I think there's better work being done now than there has been, to be honest, because the imperative's quite clear.
Any closing tips, advice, things that are part of how you operate that you can share with listeners, some things that they could take on board?
Yeah, look, I think the first one is if you can reduce every meeting that you have by 15% in terms of time, just pull it back by 5 minutes, 7 minutes, 10 minutes. I don't mind what it is. Grab that back and then invest that time in working on areas of curiosity for the work you do. I've been really enjoying setting 3 hours aside a couple of mornings a week just to play with AI, to be completely honest. And I say play intentionally because I don't necessarily know what I'm going to find out, but I'm learning so much and I'm expanding my mind so much and I'm asking better questions as a consequence. There's just no way you won't grow and be more productive out of doing both of those things. A big piece of advice I've given for a long time is be sure that you have maker time as well as doer time in your calendar. And that came from a blog post from forever and ever ago. But I just think that that's incredibly important to get yourself out of that busy cadence of meeting to meeting exhaustion. Basically, there's just your brain cannot do that. It's irrefutable. Your brain cannot operate that way. So we're just actually being idiots by allowing that to sustain itself. And I think finally, and it's a clear tie with everything, and it ties into my AI provocation, but just be curious. You keep on your curious edge. You'll have a lot more fun. You'll learn a lot more, and I think you'll be a better human and a better worker as a consequence of it. So, yeah, there's a million things. I could do a whole advice hour with you, but those would be jumping out at me.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Claudia Batten.
Great.
Real
Thank
privilege
you.
to talk with you. And yeah, thanks for sharing your stories and your learnings from along the way.
Well, thank you for capturing it. It's so important that we talk about our business stories as much as our other stories. So thank you for the work you're doing.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Great.
Well, I trust you enjoyed hearing from Claudia Batten. So many insights packed in there. And look, a big thank you to Claudia for joining us on the show, and to our show partners, One New Zealand and Gorilla Technology, for their support. Be sure to listen in to our other episodes featuring many of New Zealand's most successful leaders, including founders such as Sir Peter Beck of Rocket Lab, Brooke Roberts of Sharesies, Sir Rod Drury of Xero, Cecilia Robinson of My Food Bag, Sir Michael Hill, and many more. And if you benefited from this episode, be sure to share it with a friend. And before we go, a quick question. How confident are you that your organisation is appropriately positioned from the perspectives of technology and artificial intelligence enablement and cybersecurity risk reduction? If you're not as confident as you should be, get in touch with Gorilla Technology today to learn how a tech or cyber audit could help you. All right, we'll catch you on the next episode. This is Paul Spain signing out.
The New Zealand Business Podcast, brought to you by Gorilla Technology, your strategic and proactive IT partner.